Did Ripple just expose the playbook by meeting with the Federal Reserve? Today, we're going to show our listeners a brand new update out of Charles Hoskinson, as well as Gronk and ChatGPT, that highlight just how close the relationship is between Ripple and many of the key officials at the Federal Reserve today. You've heard several other channels highlight the connections between Brad Garlinghouse, Stuart Alderati, David Schwartz, and the United States government. Well, today, we're going to go one level deeper, connecting Ripple not only to the United States government, but to the systems that control our banking system today. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Good Evening Crypto, your favorite crypto news related channel. If you enjoy this content, smash that like button and subscribe, as you're going to get an update every single day, 5:30 p.m. Eastern time. So what is the breaking news of today? During today's meeting with the Federal Reserve, Ripple's CEO was able to attend, which was closed door and not open to the public. Specifically, he participated in a roundtable discussion alongside other industry leaders, including Charles Hoskinson, Chainlink's co-founder, Solana's co-founder, and the co-founder of Near Protocol. This event was reportedly on August 25th, 2025, and focused on how different blockchain projects could collaborate in the future. Hoskinson noted a great conversation with Brad Garlinghouse, suggesting a potential collaboration between Cardano, Ripple, and maybe even the Federal Reserve.
So I was just at a roundtable of the Federal Reserve. It was a really nice inter-industry. So two of the reserve governors were there. I was actually with Anatoly from Solana and Sergey from Chainlink and Ilya from Near and Brad from XRP. So it was a very nice roundtable. And we had a chance to directly interact with the Federal Reserve. And the Fed is trying to figure out, what is their role, place, and purpose with the Genius Act? Because traditionally, the Fed is the payment regulator, and they've been doing that for 120 years, give or take. The thing about the Fed is that they were kind of left out of the party. There's three primary regulatory bodies that deal with this. There's the OCC, the FDIC, and the Federal Reserve. The reason this is relevant is that stablecoins live in two worlds at the same time. One, they live in the Web3 world, so they're tokenized. And we think a lot about, well, how do I get more liquidity and volume? There's over $250 billion worth of tokens that have been issued, 180 plus million transactions every month. It's a very dense, beautiful, high velocity space. But those only have value because somebody's holding an asset on the other side in the legacy world. In the legacy world, it's either at a bank or it's somewhere else, and it's represented some way, like as a treasury, for example. So Genius, what it did is it created some baseline rules of the road, but now rulemaking has to occur. And they have to start talking about things like, can you get a master account with the Fed? Or how do you insure these? Or what are the custodial standards? Or what is the audit oversight and appearance of a cryptocurrency asset? And this also allows you to add privacy to other assets like Bitcoin.
So, Johnny, what I think is really important here is obviously the Federal Reserve had all these questions, and they reached out to 5 industry leaders: Brad Garlinghouse, Charles Hoskinson, the Chainlink co-founder, a Solana co-founder, and the Near Protocol co-founder. There were 3 key members of the Federal Reserve that attended: Michelle Bowman, Christopher Waller, and another source that could not be named. So we're unsure about who that third person was. 5 major bullet points that were discussed. Number 1, the Federal Reserve's role in crypto and payments. The Fed is described as trying to figure out their role and purpose in the crypto space, and they've been doing so since the beginning of the Trump administration, starting in November. Stablecoins and tokenization were also discussed. Regulatory operational standards, inter-project collaboration, having different protocols working with one another, and finally, the broader policy shifts and economic context for why blockchain products are going to be essential throughout the Trump administration and beyond. So this is about the United States government and the United States banking system simultaneously adopting these technologies, and there's only a couple of big projects in the room: Cardano, Chainlink, Ripple, Solana, and Near Protocol. Do with that information what you will, guys, but if that's new information to you, show us some love, smash that like button, and let us know some of your thoughts in chat. Johnny, before we deep dive some of the collaborations and connections that have been happening with the Federal Reserve and Ripple since 2017, I'd love to hear what's your initial reaction to, once again, Brad Garlinghouse being a part of the most important conversations, not just with the sitting president, but now with the Federal Reserve.
I mean, listen, whenever you're sitting with one of the most powerful entities in the world, it brings credibility to your statue, to the company you're working with, right? To be able to be sitting around that table, because the folks around that table are going to help mold future potential policies. But the thing that really comes to my mind first, Abs, is how, for the first time in your lifetime and mine, the Federal Reserve is realizing that there's a technology out there that's going to represent a monetary system that they don't control. And that scares the bejesus out of them. I mean, you have to understand, the Federal Reserve controls the whole entire monetary system, not the SWIFT. The SWIFT is just a tool that the Federal Reserve uses. So you understand now how the Federal Reserve is sitting there going, well, wait a minute. We've been the kings. We've been the rule makers. We're the ones that determine how money works in the countries, in the world. And now we've got this thing over here that plays outside the system. They're very worried about that, Abs. That's a big problem. Why am I excited? Well, I'm excited because you just mentioned 5 companies. I don't know about you, but I'm invested in all 5 of those. And that has me excited to know that the investments I'm making is being represented around the table of the most powerful people in the world that are going to dictate how blockchain. Because don't think for a minute that blockchains are going to go running off freely on their own and the Fed ain't going to be involved. Oh, if you think that, you are missing the boat, people. It is not. Everybody thinks like, oh, the Fed's going to get closed. It's going to get shut down. Blockchain's going to replace it. No. Sorry. That is not happening, folks. What's going to happen is exactly what the Fed is trying to figure out is, oh, wait a minute. We're going to rein this thing in. We're going to figure out how we're going to control it. We're going to let it be out there and we're going to let it work and we're going to take advantages of all the efficiencies and the benefits and the cheaper, better that blockchains bring. But it ain't going to be done without us being involved. And that, my friends, today is what you just witnessed. Why should you be happy about that? Well, most people are like, well, I don't want the Fed involved. Listen, none of us do. But guess what? If the Fed don't get involved, this ain't happening. So you might as well embrace the fact that this Abs is another early indicator that blockchains are going to move forward and the Fed is going to be involved. Because the sooner, I hate to say this, Abs, but it's, I don't even want to say it. As soon as the Fed does kind of give its blessing and gets involved, you're going to see this thing start moving much faster as well, in my opinion. So,
and there's only about a half dozen projects that are really working closely with the Federal Reserve and with the United States government. And a lot of times, those are the projects we focus on here on Good Evening Crypto. It's Chainlink, Ripple, Stellar, AVAX, Ethereum, Solana, HBAR. The list is very short. And I think anybody who goes out and does their research, they're going to find that there's only a couple of projects that are really working to build the future of finance. And the rest of it is excess noise in the crypto market. If you guys agree, show us some love, smash that like button. We're going to take you through many of the connections that have existed between both the Federal Reserve and Donald Trump, dating all the way back to his first term back in 2016. Now, back in 2017, Ripple had participated in the Federal Reserve's Faster Payments Council, invoking a stakeholder interaction, likely including meetings. So they were sitting down directly with the Federal Reserve and planning how they were going to incorporate the Fed payment system into Ripple's products. In 2023, Ripple joined the FEDNOW pilot program as an early adopter, suggesting meetings for integration and collaboration. Ripple's CEO and co-founder attended the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia's FinTech conference in 2024. This was less than 12 months ago, indicating high-level engagement with Ripple products. Following so, Ripple applied for a Federal Reserve master account in 2025, implying discussions or meetings for regulatory approval. And here might be the most important detail, Johnny. 27 of 37 FedNow service providers have Ripple connections, suggesting multiple interactions through specific meetings. Counts are undisclosed. So we don't even know how many times Ripple has really met with these members of the FedNow Council, whether it's with Ripple directly or with the Federal Reserve. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts. Floor is yours.
you know, I think one of those things is we're not going to hear how often they've met, but the fact is they have met. And that's what's most important, Abs. We want them sitting around the table, having these conversations, being able to figure out how they're going to work together. That by far is so more critical than any other aspect here of the integration of the technology. And when you look at this bullet list you have here, we're not talking about like, they had one meeting or two meetings. Look at the consistency. Now I get it. There was a major gap from 17 to 2023, but and we kind of know partly what happened in 2020. For those of you who don't, they got sued. But let's look at what's happening since then. Look at the progress and momentum that's showing you how Ripple's been completely involved in this whole process. They are highly integrated into trying to solve one of the bank's most biggest problems, which is cross-border payment solutions and the high the inefficiencies of that, the friction in the system, the inundated system that sucks, that I send money or I make a trade on my account and I can't get my money for 3 days. I sold a stock the other day and I wanted to move the money to another account. I couldn't do it. It was frustrating.
Well, I want to come back to why we're even covering this stuff for our listeners, right? I think the important thing to people to understand is that the Fed is looking for solutions. They printed too much money. We have rapid inflation. We have settlement cost issues. This system is completely default, essentially. And we know that there's an inevitable change coming towards the back end of 2025. What I think is important for our listeners is Ripple met with the Federal Reserve. Let's discuss what they could be working on. And when we look at some of the particular topics that were brought up during this event, I covered them earlier, but the 2 bullet points that really stick out to me, stablecoins and tokenization, as well as regulatory and operational standards. So access to a Federal Reserve master account for Ripple, which they already applied for back in July of 2025, Brad Garlinghouse could be sitting there advocating for why this not only benefits Ripple, but it benefits the Federal Reserve, where they don't have to become reliant on many of these blockchain products, but instead are using them to the advantage of the system that exists today. And you can only imagine what would happen to an asset like XRP. The XRP price chart that's really set to benefit off of this innovation here inside the United States. Ripple has already launched their RLUSD stablecoin. We now have the tokenization of gold and silver happening on the network. We have ETFs set to go live in October of this year. And we have a price chart that has been suppressed all throughout the 2021 bull run, Johnny. But when you really go back, we have not broken all-time high dating all the way back to 2018. And this is a price chart that was shared by Raoul Pal, clearly showing the built-up momentum. And what we're about to do here from an explosive standpoint doesn't really matter who you talk to. A lot of TA people are bullish on the XRP price chart. And Raoul Paul's a great example of a Solana and Ethereum investor that's looking at the price chart for XRP and going 8 years below all-time high. SEC lawsuit is officially over. Mass adoption currently taking place. And now Ripple is building real products and launching them on the ledger. So 1,700 NDAs, over 300 companies around the world, 26 plus central banks working with this company. I think it's long overdue that XRP is going to break its all-time high, and we're going to see some extremely high daily closures starting at the end of the year. The Fibonacci's tell us a minimum of 4, maybe a peak of $9. I think that's boring price action for a lot of people, right? The truth of the matter is, if what we're talking about today comes true, then the truth of the matter is 4, 9, 25, 36, it's all pennies on the dollar, because the Federal Reserve is going to be leveraging this blockchain protocol more and more every year starting now.
Yeah, obviously if the Fed engages and adopts these blockchains and we start to see, I think, a coexistence of these, there's no question about it. $4, $9, $26 are going to be numbers that you're never going to see in a long time. They'll be gone. You'll be talking numbers way higher than that. I think right now what's happening though is the Fed is trying to figure out how are we going to work with these companies and what does that mean? How are we going to master account? How do we loan money? How do we make sure that all the systems they have with cash are going to be able to still be transmutable to the blockchain technology and how that's going to work? So the good news is when they get that all figured out, now you're talking about, okay, now it gets fun. Now it gets exciting. Now we're talking about moving big chunks of money on these different blockchains. And that's where your price chart predictions come in, because now you're talking about billions to trillions being handled on a potential daily or annual basis that these blockchains have to support. That's going to have intrinsic value to those blockchains, and I think is going to translate to the cryptocurrency price. And abs, I mean, we're sitting here talking, you and I have talked 2 digits, even 3 digits. But when you start talking about handling the amount of money the Federal Reserve does, now you're talking probably 4 digits. A lot of people talking 10,000, right? And that the 5-digit number, because of the fact that they always felt like this was going to replace the SWIFT system in the Federal Reserve. So don't be surprised, if we start seeing crazy numbers and predictions, if we start seeing the Federal Reserve adopting these blockchain technologies as the new means for how they're going to start working and moving money around.
And what's pretty exciting is just this week, we got a major announcement out of the U.S. Department of Commerce that announced that they were going to be publishing GDP data on 9 different blockchains. We're going to cover that later on in the episode. But Johnny, you know what I think? I think that the ETF craze coming in October could be the catalyst that kicks off the alt season we've been talking about here for several months. If you're enjoying this content, show us some love, smash that like button, and subscribe to the channel as you get an update every single day. Here's what Paul Barron had to say with Canary CEO, who's anticipating $5 billion of inflows into XRP in just the first 4 weeks. Here it is.
The Ripple ETF or XRP ETF approval odds right now on Polymarket hovering at around 86%. So one of its highest points, but it looks like this is going to happen. And what is the likelihood of the timing for this right now?
I would guess that XRP would probably be this year. Either Eric or James from Bloomberg simply said, well, if there's futures at Coinbase, then you probably get an ETF in 2025.
Your statement at that time was 5 billion in the first month. Are you still holding to that? Do you think that's a possibility?
I really am. I would say after Bitcoin, XRP is probably the most well-known on Wall Street and on finance circles. And then ETH is actually probably number 3. So if you think about it that way, I do believe that XRP could potentially outperform ETH just from, pure financial services standpoint.
Johnny Krypto, and the quiet part that I think he's trying to say out loud here is that people call Ethereum the Wall Street token. When it's all said and done, XRP will be the Wall Street token. And the SEC filings for the ETFs kind of highlight this. Franklin Templeton, Goldman Sachs, Bitwise, all these different companies have publicly shown interest. And it's not just XRP, right? It's Hedera, it's Chainlink, it's Stellar. There's a couple of projects where there's tons of opportunity. But for the sake of this conversation, when you're talking ETF demand, there are so many people who are ready to onboard into the XRP ecosystem through the technologies that we're talking about right now. $5 billion in new liquidity could push this market cap far higher than people think. That could easily be a 50, 75, $100 billion increase in market cap on the lower end. It comes down to the order books on these exchanges, not what the market cap says on CoinMarketCap. Johnny Krypto, what's your reaction here?
Yeah, I mean, Abs, first of all, the fact that there are so many. I mean, when I look at the number of ETF filings that we had for Bitcoin, it was, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4. ETH only had a few. And look at this. I mean, this list just keeps growing. When we started first showing this, I think you were like, oh, Johnny, there's 14. You're like, Johnny, there's 17. Now I think I heard you just say there's 19 filings, Abs. So it keeps growing. There's a reason. They know that there's probably no larger or loyal community out there than the XRP community. There is no doubt. And they want a piece of that pie. And they're going to put these ETFs out there. And the good news about when they're putting these things out there is they're going to create credibility for the XRP token, for the ledger. And then they're going to start calling up all the boomers. And they're going to start driving volume 401k money into this apps. And so when you talk about a multiplier factor, and you talk about, 50 billion, 100 billion. No. It's going to be higher than that. If we get 8 billion, you're almost talking $800 billion in market cap, almost $1 trillion market cap for where we are today. I mean, you can do the math and really put you around the $20 XRP. That's pretty exciting. And that's just strictly off of ETF potential income money, nothing else. But I do agree with you that just the way that the Bitcoin ETFs kind of triggered that mini bull run we had with Bitcoin, when that happened, it would not surprise me.
Well, I want to highlight why this is so important once again, guys, because not only is there only a few companies and a few blockchain companies that are working with the Federal Reserve, there's only a couple more working with the United States government, and Ripple falls into both those categories. So what I think we're witnessing here, Johnny, is that Ripple, and we've heard these rumors for a long time, Ripple is essentially a government entity. They're a private company, but they were set out by the United States government to prepare for what we're going through today. Donald Trump gave a great speech a couple of months ago where he said, we are going to use blockchain products to modernize our settlement systems. That exposes the playbook. And now we're seeing this meeting here with Chainlink, Ripple, and Cardano, 3 of the largest United States blockchain companies, working directly with the Federal Reserve, discussing things like tokenization, discussing ideas like stablecoins, discussing ideas like the modernization of banking and the collaboration ability to work together for several of these different blockchains. They don't want a segmented ecosystem. Brad Garlinghouse has always advocated for this. There's going to be dozens of systems that win. It's not going to be a single player. When you think about how small the XRP community is, your 2,400 XRP gets you in the top 10% of token holders on planet Earth. That tells me that there's a lot less people who own this asset than you may think. And what's the truth of that, Johnny? Well, that may only be a $7,500 investment today. If the ideas and the collaborations that we talked about during today's episode come true, that may soon be $100,000, depending on how high we go over these next few years. And I think if you listen to people like Dom and Phil, you listen to people like Jake Claver, it's not the ETFs that are going to drive most of the liquidity into this business or into this ecosystem. It's the modernization of the NASDAQ. It's the modernization of SWIFT settlements. It's the modernization of the United States banks being able to provide liquidity to one another. And when you look at what Chainlink does versus what XRP does, Chainlink's really focused on the data aspect. XRP is really focused on the liquidity. And that's only going to become more important as the banks continue to rely on this technology more and more towards the back end of this year and so on during the Trump administration. What's your thoughts here?
It's a night and day, right? These blockchains all do different things. They all solve different use cases. But for them to work properly to solve those use cases, some of them have to work together. The two you mentioned are perfect. XRP, where they're trying to solve, cross-border solutions, well, that needs to be able to talk to other blockchains. Well, guess what Link does? Link says, hey, you can talk to other blockchains through me. So that's exactly what people don't understand yet, Abs. People don't understand how, like you get these things. Oh, Chainlink's replacing Ripple. No. That's like saying I'm going to use an 18-wheeler to replace my family car. You're not going to. They're two different use cases. They do two different things. It's not going to happen. That doesn't work that way. But, listen, technology is a hard thing to understand. People don't wrap their head around it. Most people here because they just want to get rich quick. They don't care. They just like, hey, I want to buy this, and I want to know why it's going up. It's like, well, because we need to let these markets grow. We need to let them mature. And Abs, we are transforming from a geek and nerd, like I call it. We were all geeks and nerds market to a real, true market that's now going to be managed and run just like the stock market. It will be the 12th sector economy. And why is that important? Well, because now you're here and you're investing in things that are going to appreciate, and they're going to appreciate or they're going to go away. That's what's going to happen now, Abs. We are going to shift to that kind of a market of where we're heading in that space. But for me, you talked about what the keys are here is we are replacing the way things get done in an inefficient and slow way to a much faster, cheaper, and better solution, like the banking system, like the token. We're going to have new products that we're talking new tokenization of everything in your mother is going to be owned and captured on the blockchain. These are new use cases that are going to bring new money to the blockchains that are ultimately going to lead to price appreciation on top of the ETFs and other things that you've already talked about.
Right, guys. And we're going to break this down even further because now that you have a great understanding of why altcoins are so important and how a lot of these assets have real world use cases like Ripple, Hedera, Algorand, and so on, we're going to break down some of the nuanced conversations that have been had from the Bitcoin community. And they describe how this narrative, Johnny, when it comes to the adoption of digital assets on Wall Street, it's Bitcoin only, according to this community. We're going to provide a dose of truth. If you guys enjoy this content, smash that like button. Let us know some of your thoughts in chat. Here it is.
I think it's important also to note that BlackRock is a good one to look at. Is they have the Bitcoin ETF and the Ethereum ETF, and that you could see that the story of Bitcoin is easy. It's a powerful story. There's no story for Ethereum. What is it? Right. Why? Like, there's no story for any of the other currencies, the coins out there. BlackRock actually just recently said they're not going to offer a Solana or one of the other coins. I don't know. But they're not going to be, or XRP. They're not going to be offering, ETFs for any of those. They're going to stick with, they're sticking with a Bitcoin one, especially. Even Coinbase. Right? Like, so they keep on putting out these amazing Bitcoin commercials. They never do a commercial about XRP or any of the other tokens that they actually push if you sign up for them. Like, it's like pushing the other tokens because the exchanges make money on that, right? But the story, the narrative is only in Bitcoin. So that's the only story that matters.
Well, Johnny Krypto, this reminds me of a clip back in 2017 when people would talk about the Bitcoin only narrative as if it had some validity. But like we just covered during today's episode, the Federal Reserve, the United States government, they're meeting with the leaders of these altcoins. I don't see Satoshi walking into any government building, and I don't think I ever will. But the truth of the matter is that Bitcoin's success can only go so far. Stablecoins, smart contracts, for these unique individual features, you need blockchain protocols like Ethereum, like Solana, like XRP, so on and so forth. Pick your favorite ecosystem, so be it. but we can see who's working with the powerful players today. We don't have to speculate any longer. So I think when somebody shares a Bitcoin only narrative like this one, it can be hard for new investors to understand. Many people may even fall for that narrative that Bitcoin's the only real digital asset. But as you guys can tell, as time goes on, as this market becomes regulated and new financial products are launched, like the ETFs we're discussing, stablecoins, tokenized assets, all of these different features, it's going to become more and more obvious that altcoins were always as legitimate as Bitcoin. And there's going to be a bunch of projects that outperform Bitcoin over these next 4 or 5 years. Johnny Krypto, what are your thoughts?
You know, Abs, there's a big community out there. This is the problem with maximalism. There's a big chunk of people who, you know, have come into this space and they're a true believer of Bitcoin, and they just don't want to have an open mind to understand that that's just not how it's going to work in the long run. And those people, like for her to sit there and go, there's no story for Ethereum. What? Bitcoin doesn't even have smart contracts. In fact, Ethereum does more work on the blockchain than any of. I mean, everything's running on smart contracts right now. Ethereum has a massive story. What is she talking about? She doesn't have a clue what she's even saying. It's ridiculous. So to sit here and think that a certain blockchain is going to be the only one that wins and drives this thing just tells me that people want where they've invested their money to win, and that's it. And they don't want to, and they got the blinders on, and they don't want to see or even think that any other blockchain can even exist or do anything. And they're all crap, they're all garbage, and they do nothing. And listen, all you're doing to yourself, if you're in that camp, and that's fine, you can be, you're just going to miss out on massive opportunities. That's it. Because you're only going to be looking like, oh, okay, I just need Bitcoin. Bitcoin's going to drive the future. Well, no, it ain't. It's going to do something. Don't get me wrong. I own Bitcoin. It's going to have its place to play. But when you play stuff like that and I watch it and I just look at it and go, wow, even in 2025, you haven't opened. Abs, I kind of felt when we went to the Bitcoin conference last year, I actually felt there wasn't as much maximalism. I thought they were opening up their minds a little bit more to some altcoins, some of the people we interacted with. So people are starting to open up, but there's still a good chunk like this that aren't. Well, let me tell you, you're just going to miss out on massive opportunities because altcoins, Abs, I hate to say it, are going to have a massive place to play, especially the ones you mentioned, Link, HBAR, XRP, XLM. These are in the top 10 or 20 apps. These are working with U.S. governments and other governments. They've got massive foundations and partnerships. They aren't going anywhere. These are going to be the plays that are going to give you a chance to create generational wealth for you and your family if you invest in them early enough.
And I think we're early enough into this market, Johnny, where we're early enough to benefit off these capital gains that we're going to experience, but we're not too late to recognize that this thing's just getting started. And I think this journey really is just beginning here in the summer of 2025 when it comes to the evolution of this asset class, meaning the integration of blockchain into regular businesses. Having mainstream vendors like Target, like Walmart, like Apple and Amazon, all having crypto wallets and making those accessible for everyday people. That starts after the Clarity Act is passed here in 2025. And Charles Hoskinson said at that very moment, you're going to see 3 billion new users onboarded into the crypto market. You don't think a project like XRP is set to capitalize on that?
Not only is like Ripple going to be there trying to do it, you have to understand the way markets work and businesses work, Abs, they listen to the people. There's a reason why companies do consumer research. You don't think people aren't going to be, XRP communities not going to be screaming? If Apple launches a wallet and they don't have XRP in there, you don't think people are going to be messaging Apple going, where the heck's XRP? So I just want you to think about it from that perspective. Not only is there going to be what we call a push, meaning the companies are going to push their technology, but I guarantee you, I can tell you already, it's going to happen. There will be a pull from the market, from XRP users saying, hey, I want XRP in your product. And let me tell you something. There are companies, they hate pushes, but they love pulls because if people want it, they want to service that need. And you don't believe me? Well, let me tell you this stat. There was a guy I was talking to Spaces who was a financial advisor. He said his phone rang a little bit when they were talking about Bitcoin ETFs. When the Ethereum ETF were being offered, phone didn't ring at all. He said now his phone is ringing off the hook. People wanting to buy an XRP ETF and they can't get it. That, my friends, is what we call pull from the market. And that's going to be a driving factor that's going to put. And why should you be excited if you're XRP? Well, it's probably the most loyal community in the world today.
A lot of people aren't in this asset for $5. They're not in it for $10. They are sitting in this market waiting for a triple digit, even quadruple digit XRP. And that's only going to work in favor of this project as the price continues to climb. Now, what do we know? History doesn't repeat, but it often rhymes. Back in 2017, for the newer investors in XRP, this is a project that did 70,000% gains in only 240 days. That means that for every dollar you invested at the beginning of that time frame, by the end of those 240 days, it was worth $7,000. Your $10 investment was now worth $70,000. I'll say that again for the people in the back. So a lot of people are underestimating just how quickly the XRP price can move. And just because we're at $3 today doesn't mean that next summer, this couldn't be a double or even close to a triple digit asset, depending on if the catalysts that we've outlined today come to fruition. Ripple receiving a Fed master account, receiving approval to become a United States bank, working directly with the US government, working directly with the Federal Reserve. These are the things that we've been asking for. These are the catalysts that we've been looking for, and they're all lining up here towards the back end of 2025. If you enjoyed this content, smash that like button, and we'll see you all in the next one.